The email came at 6:47 in the morning, 3 words long. We went another way. No explanation, no warning. 6 months of work, erased in one line, sent by a man who had shaken your hand a week earlier and called you the obvious choice. You stare at the screen and feel something crack that has nothing to do with the job. It's the last piece of a belief you didn't even know you were still holding, that if you did the work, if you stayed honest, if you kept your word, the world would eventually keep its word back to you. It doesn't. And somewhere across the centuries, a thin man in a Florentine study who buried his own ambitions under exile and silence would look at your face right now and say nothing comforting at all. He would simply say, "Now you understand. Nobody prepares you for this shift." Somewhere in your late 20s, the ground moves beneath your feet, and nobody rings a bell to announce it. You keep operating on the rules you were handed as a child. Be good, be patient, wait your turn, and the world keeps rewarding people who never learned those rules at all. You watch a colleague who contributes less, cares less, and performs more walk into rooms you weren't invited to. You watch a friend disappear the moment you stop being useful to their story. You watch love get weighed on a scale you were never told existed. This isn't bad luck. This isn't a broken system waiting for you to file a complaint. This is the actual shape of adult life. And the man who mapped it 500 years ago has more to teach you about surviving it than every warm, comforting voice currently profiting off your confusion. His name was Machiavelli, and he didn't write for dreamers. He wrote for people standing exactly where you're standing, exposed, unprotected, watching others maneuver in a game they never agreed to play. And what he understood, brutally and completely, is this: the moment you stop expecting fairness is the moment you finally start winning. Here is the shift nobody explains to you. When you were younger, your inexperience was a kind of armor. People forgave your mistakes because you were still becoming something. Mentors extended patience. Strangers extended benefit of the doubt. The future stretched out ahead of you like a blank check nobody had cashed yet. But somewhere after 30, that check gets called in. The forgiveness dries up. People stop asking who you might become and start asking, coldly, what you already are. What have you built? What can you offer? What happens to my life if I stand near yours? This isn't cruelty, it's arithmetic. And once you understand it as arithmetic, instead of betrayal, something in your chest finally loosens. Machiavelli would tell you that every relationship, every workplace, every family gathering operates on a private ledger that nobody speaks aloud. People are not measuring your character. They are measuring your territory, your skills, your leverage, your usefulness, the size of the kingdom you've quietly built while pretending you weren't building anything at all. If your walls are thin, they don't need to attack you directly. They simply root around you. They leave you out of the conversation. They let a rumor calcify into a reputation. 3 words end up attached to your name: not ambitious enough, too emotional, not a leader, and by the time you notice, the decision has already been made without you in the room. The first move, then, is not revenge, and it's not despair. It's a change in expectation. Stop assuming people are driven by loyalty to you, and start assuming they are driven by loyalty to themselves. This sounds cynical until you actually live inside it, and then it becomes something closer to peace. The sibling who calls only when they need something is not a personal wound. They are simply behaving exactly as their incentives predict. The coworker who takes credit is not a monster. They are a rational actor in an environment that rewards visibility over honesty. Once you see the pattern instead of the personal insult, you stop being surprised. And the moment you stop being surprised, you stop being controlled. There is a temptation here to armor yourself in moral outrage instead, to announce that you refuse to play a dirty game, that your integrity is worth more than winning. It sounds noble. It changes nothing. The wolves in Machiavelli's world do not pause to admire the sheep's principles. Refusing to understand the game does not exempt you from the game. It simply guarantees you'll lose it slowly, quietly, and without ever knowing why. The alternative isn't becoming cruel. It's becoming aware, sharp enough to see the moves being made around you, and disciplined enough to make your own. So how does an ordinary, decent person become someone who can no longer be quietly maneuvered? Machiavelli's answer starts with usefulness, but it doesn't end there. Usefulness alone just makes you a well-treated tool necessary. But replaceable the second something more convenient appears. What protects you is usefulness converted into leverage, skills nobody else in the room has, income that doesn't depend on a single person's mood, relationships that don't collapse the moment one person walks away. Ask yourself something uncomfortable tonight. If the people who currently hold power over your life decided tomorrow to stop treating you fairly, how much could they actually take from you? If the honest answer is everything, you are not simply vulnerable, you are already being quietly controlled, and you just haven't been told the terms. Building leverage means building redundancy, not because you plan to betray anyone, but because dependency is the fastest route to exploitation. A second skill, a second income stream, a circle wider than one relationship, one job, one approval. This is not paranoia dressed up as strategy, it is simply refusing to hand any single person a lever marked his entire future, and then acting shocked when they eventually pull it. Machiavelli would also have you audit your circle with the eyes of a prince rather than the eyes of a friend collecting company. Not everyone standing near you is actually with you. Some people clap in public and quietly resent you in private. Some people ask, "Are you sure?" every time you mention an opportunity, dressing their own fear as your caution. You don't need to confront these people or stage some dramatic severance. You simply start withdrawing access, shorter answers, less information, fewer invitations into the parts of your life that matter. Let the distance do the talking. The people who were feeding on your openness will drift. The ones who were genuinely for you will barely notice the difference, because they never needed that much access in the first place. Then there's the matter of image, which after 30 stops being vanity and starts being armor. People make decisions about you in seconds, based on how you carry a room before you've said a word, your posture, your tone, whether your face gives away every private doubt. You can resent this, or you can use it. A steady voice, a calm expression under pressure, clothes that say competence rather than desperation. None of this is about becoming someone else. It's about controlling the first impression instead of leaving it to chance. Because in an unfair world, the signal often lands before the substance ever gets a hearing. Here is where Machiavelli becomes genuinely uncomfortable and genuinely useful. He tells you to stop broadcasting your plans. Children announce their dreams to anyone who will listen. Adults understand that every unfinished ambition spoken aloud becomes a data point for someone else, a way to measure whether you're catching up, falling behind, or worth quietly sabotaging. The question, "How's that project going?" is rarely concern. More often, it's reconnaissance. So you learn to work in silence and arrive with results instead of previews. Let people discover what you've built after it's finished, not while it's still fragile enough to be undermined. The same discipline applies to emotion. This doesn't mean becoming hollow, it means understanding that oversharing your fears in the wrong room hands people a map of exactly where to press. Cry if you need to, but choose the room carefully. Doubt yourself if you must, but not in front of the people already circling for evidence that you're not ready. Present, calm in public. Save the honest, unfiltered version of yourself for the small handful of people who have actually earned it. The rest of the world only needs to see the results. And love, contrary to what you were taught, does not sit outside this game, it sits inside it, quietly. People stay in relationships for reasons that have little to do with pure feeling, convenience, comfort, fear of starting over. A private calculation about whether you're still their best available option. If your entire romantic strategy is loyalty and good intentions, you will eventually be blindsided by someone who understood, long before you did, that respect and admiration are also currencies. This isn't a call to manipulate the people you love. It's a call to never negotiate your worth from a position of dependency, to keep your standards, your ambitions, and your sense of self intact enough that if someone chooses to treat your heart carelessly, your response isn't collapse, it's distance. Perhaps the hardest lesson is this: not every act of forgiveness looks the same. Some people made a mistake inside an otherwise loyal pattern, and forgiving them means letting them back in. Others revealed exactly who they were the moment it was inconvenient to stand beside you, silent when you needed defending, amused when you struggled, absent the instant your usefulness ran out. Forgiving that second group doesn't mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means closing it permanently and calling that closure mercy, mercy for yourself, for the years you'd otherwise spend hoping someone becomes a different person than the one they already showed you. None of this, Machiavelli would insist, is a license for cruelty. He never told princes to be vicious for entertainment. He told them to be firm when firmness is required, discreet when discretion protects them, and generous when generosity actually builds something. That is the version of this philosophy worth keeping, not becoming someone who exploits every room, but someone who can no longer be casually exploited in one. You are not required to correct every misunderstanding about you. You are not obligated to rescue every person who refuses to change. You are not responsible for making an unfair arena feel fair by absorbing all its costs yourself. What happens when you actually live this way, quietly capable, harder to read, less available to people who only valued your availability, is strange and almost immediate. The very people who once treated you carelessly start recalculating, not because they've suddenly discovered kindness, but because the private arithmetic has changed. The cost of dismissing you has finally started to outweigh the benefit. That shift, subtle and unspoken, is the closest thing to fairness this world will ever hand you, and it is only ever earned, never requested. There is another layer to this that most people avoid discussing honestly, and it concerns money. You've been told your whole life that money isn't supposed to matter this much, that it's shallow to think about it, that decent people focus on meaning instead. And yet watch closely how decisions actually get made in the rooms you're not invited into. Watch who gets forgiven for their mistakes and who gets quietly pushed out. Watch who can afford to say no in a negotiation and who has to smile and accept whatever is offered. Money, whether anyone admits it aloud, is one of the clearest forms of power in adult life because it determines who can walk away and who cannot. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. A prince without resources is a prince who begs, and a prince who begs is a prince who obeys. This isn't a call to worship wealth. It's a call to stop treating your finances as an afterthought you'll deal with someday. Every dollar you save, every skill you build that increases what you're worth in the market, every debt you avoid that would otherwise chain you to a job or a person you've outgrown, all of it is leverage. When the people around you sense that you can leave, they negotiate differently. When they sense you're trapped, they stop negotiating at all. there's a second discipline that matters just as much, and it's harder to practice than it sounds: choosing your truths carefully. Total honesty, offered indiscriminately to everyone at all times, feels virtuous, but it is often just carelessness wearing a halo. After 30, you learn that not every person who asks a question deserves the full answer. When your manager asks how committed you are to the company, you don't need to confess every private doubt about the industry you speak to. What serves the conversation? When a rival casually asks how far along your project is, you don't need to hand them a progress report. You give them just enough comfort to keep them careless. When someone you love asks if something's wrong, you don't need to dump every unsorted emotion onto them in that moment. You share what actually moves things forward. This isn't deception for its own sake. It's understanding that truth, like anything valuable, should be given with intention, not scattered indiscriminately to whoever happens to ask. You also have to become a student of your own weaknesses before someone else studies them first. After 30, public embarrassment costs more and lingers longer. A single outburst, one moment of losing control in the wrong room, can undo years of quiet credibility. He can't handle pressure becomes the sentence people repeat long after they've forgotten every calm, competent thing you did before it. So instead of hoping you'll never be provoked, study exactly what provokes you. Which comments make your chest tighten? Which situations make you feel small or dismissed? Once you know your own triggers as clearly as a general studies enemy terrain, you can prepare your response in advance so that when the moment actually arrives, you already have the sentence ready. I'll think about it and get back to you. Let's revisit this tomorrow when we've both had time. These small, rehearsed lines do something powerful. They buy you time. And time is what lets the heat drain out of a moment before it turns into a mistake you'll be paying for years. Alongside this comes a strange kind of freedom, releasing yourself from the obligation to correct every misunderstanding about who you are. Someone will twist your words. Let them. Someone will assume a motive you never had. Let them. Someone will read your silence as guilt or arrogance or indifference when it was really just exhaustion. Let them believe what they need to believe. The people determined to misread you will always find an angle, no matter how carefully you explain yourself. And chasing every distortion drains energy you could be spending on something that actually compounds your work, your skill, your quiet, visible pattern of competence over time. Eventually that pattern becomes loud enough that a single rumor looks like noise against the signal of an entire life. This is not a philosophy of constant war. It is not about becoming someone who trusts nothing and no one, sharpening yourself into a permanent state of suspicion. The actual destination is calm, the specific, hard-won calm of someone who no longer depends on the goodwill of people who were never obligated to give it. You can still be kind without being drained by it. You can still be generous without being exploited for it. You can still love fully without collapsing the moment someone with divided loyalty walks away, because your sense of self was never built on their approval in the first place. This kind of composure isn't something you summon the moment a crisis arrives. It's something you build in the small, forgettable moments nobody's grading you on. The way you handle a waiter getting your order wrong. The way you talk about someone the second they leave the room. The way you react when a plan changes at the last minute and your whole evening gets rearranged without your consent. None of these moments matter individually, but together they're rehearsal. They're where you practice staying level so that when the real test arrives, the layoff, the betrayal, the public embarrassment, you already know how your body responds to pressure. People trust composure more than they trust talent. They promote it, follow it, lend it their loyalty, because a calm presence signals that whoever holds it can be relied on when things go wrong. Practice on the small frictions, deliberately, and the large ones stop catching you off guard. You should expect, somewhere along this path, to be called distant, cold, calculating, let it land without flinching, because it usually means something has actually shifted. The people who once managed you through guilt or chaos have noticed they no longer can. You haven't become heartless. You've simply stopped offering your heart as collateral in every negotiation, stopped treating openness as an obligation owed to anyone who demands it. The people who genuinely value you will adjust to this version without much friction, because they were never relying on your exhaustion to feel close to you. The ones who leave in search of someone easier to control were never actually on your side to begin with. They were just comfortable with the version of you that couldn't say no. And that, in the end, is the entire point of learning to see the world this clearly. Not to turn every relationship into a negotiation, not to walk through your days suspicious of everyone you meet, but to build enough leverage, enough self-possession, enough quiet inner ground that you can finally afford to relax. To be generous without being drained. To be kind without being used. To love completely without your whole identity collapsing the moment someone with divided loyalty decides to leave. That is the only victory worth wanting here, not defeating anyone, but constructing a life so deliberately built that whether the people around you choose to play fair or not, you still walk away with what actually matters. Your time, your freedom, and the quiet, settled knowledge that you are no longer waiting on anyone's permission to be okay. So tonight, do one small thing that has nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with strategy. Say less in a conversation where you'd normally explain yourself into exhaustion. Decline one obligation that drains you and gives nothing back. Notice who becomes uneasy the moment you stop being endlessly available. And notice who respects you more the instant you stop over-explaining your choices. These are small signals, but they are the first honest glimpses of the real terrain you've actually been standing on the entire time. After 30, people stop playing fair, not because the world turned cruel overnight, but because it was never fair to begin with, and childhood simply shielded you from seeing it. You can spend the next decade demanding an apology from a game that was never designed to issue one. Or you can do what Machiavelli quietly urges from across 5 centuries. Stop asking the world to change its rules and start becoming someone the rules can no longer touch. Not through comfort, not through optimism, through control, the specific, private knowledge that whatever room you walk into next, whoever decides to smile at your face and work against your back, the final move, the one that actually decides your life, still belongs to you.